Even the greatest heroes carry secrets. Behind the roar of stadium crowds, beneath the glitter of 7 Super Bowl rings, and beyond the relentless headlines, Tom Brady lived a life most could only dream of. But hidden from the world, even from those closest to him, was a side of Tom few would ever suspect. It was a crisp morning in Tampa. The sun poured through the massive windows of Tom's waterfront home, glistening against the calm waves of the bay. While the world knew him as the GOAT, the greatest of all time, at home, he was simply dad, husband, and friend. A man who swapped helmets for pancake breakfasts, film study for bedtime stories, and game day pressure for family board games. Tom had always been a creature of discipline. Early riser, meticulous routines, and an almost obsessive commitment to excellence. But there was something deeper driving him, something that went far beyond trophies or records. "Dad, are you coming to Jack's soccer game?" Vivian asked, peeking into his study, her blonde hair bouncing as she leaned against the door. Tom smiled, closing the leather-bound notebook in front of him. "Of course, sweetie. Wouldn't miss it for the world." But as he rose from his chair, a subtle flicker of anxiety crossed his face. Behind that notebook wasn't just his next training schedule or nutrition plan. It held pages of something far more profound, something no one in his family had ever seen. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a small, struggling children's hospital in Michigan, a new wing was being constructed. A wing entirely funded by an anonymous donor whose check had come with only a simple note. "For the fighters. You are stronger than you know." Similar notes had appeared all over the country. Food banks saved from shutting down. Homeless shelters suddenly funded for years ahead. Families devastated by natural disasters receiving lifelines just when hope seemed lost. But the donor never revealed themselves. The name on every transfer was an alias, the North Star Foundation. Despite the massive sums involved, millions upon millions, no one could trace the true source. Investigators speculated it had to be a high-profile celebrity or tech billionaire, but the trail always went cold. At home, Giselle had started to notice little things, odd gaps in Tom's schedule, trips he brushed off as just meetings but never elaborated on, folders locked in drawers, documents quickly closed when someone entered the room. It wasn't like Tom to hide things from her. Their marriage had always been built on transparency and mutual support, but Giselle, ever respectful, didn't press. Not yet. Then came the afternoon when their eldest son, Jack, searching for his soccer cleats in Tom's home office, stumbled upon something strange. Behind a stack of books tucked away as if purposefully hidden was an envelope. On it, a handwritten label, "For when they're ready." Jack hesitated, fingers trembling. His heart raced, not out of fear, but curiosity. This wasn't something a kid normally found. He turned it over, tempted to look inside, but decided against it. Instead, he slipped it back, carefully placing it exactly where he found it. That night, as Tom tucked his children into bed, the weight of his secret pressed heavier than usual. He glanced at Giselle across the room, her smile warm, her presence grounding. She had no idea. None of them did, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it that way. Because even for someone as seemingly invincible as Tom Brady, some burdens were too heavy to carry alone. The days passed, but the weight of that envelope lingered heavily in Jack's mind. His father had always been an open book, whether about football, family, or life. But this was different. Something about that handwritten label, "For when they're ready," made Jack realize it wasn't meant for him, at least not yet. Still, curiosity has a way of eating at even the strongest wills. That evening, as Tom headed out for yet another vague meeting, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something important was being kept from them. He sat at the kitchen island, poking at his dinner while Giselle prepped tea. Her eyes glanced over to him, instantly sensing something was off. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked gently. Jack hesitated. "Mom, does Dad ever seem like he's hiding something?" The question hung in the air like a suspended breath. Giselle froze for a moment, the spoon in her hand trembling ever so slightly. She turned, leaned against the counter, and crossed her arms, considering her words carefully. You've noticed it too, she finally whispered. Jack nodded, unsure whether to feel relieved or more worried. Giselle walked over, sat beside him and lowered her voice. Your dad, he's been different lately. Not in a bad way. Just distant sometimes. Thoughtful. Like he's carrying something. Jack's voice grew smaller. I found something in his office. I didn't open it, but it was strange. Giselle squeezed his hand. Show me. Together they returned to Tom's office, the room filled with trophies, game balls, and memories of a legendary career. But behind the accolades, hidden in the shadows, lay the real story. Jack carefully retrieved the envelope. Giselle stared at it for a long time before breaking the seal, her hands shaking. Inside were several handwritten pages. The first letter began simply, If you're reading this, it means the time has come for you to know the truth. Giselle's breath caught. Jack leaned closer. The letter continued, recounting memories of Tom's childhood, growing up in San Mateo, California, in a modest home, watching his parents struggle to make ends meet. Seeing his mother work double shifts and his father pick up odd jobs to pay bills. The letter spoke of the moments that shaped him, not the victories on the field, but the quiet sacrifices that fueled his dreams. I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot the look in Mom's eyes when we couldn't afford something, or the way Dad pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. When I became successful, I made a promise that if I ever had the power to change lives, I would, not for recognition, not for headlines, but because it's the right thing to do. The next page outlined his secret donations, millions given over the years, anonymous payments to families crushed by medical debt, scholarships for underprivileged kids. Entire communities rebuilt after natural disasters, always quietly, always without fanfare. Tears streamed down Giselle's face. Jack was stunned into silence. The final line struck them both like a lightning bolt. I never told you, because I didn't want gratitude. I didn't want it to change how you saw me. But if you found this, maybe it's time you know the real reason I fight so hard isn't just for the game, it's for them, and for you. Giselle closed the letter, her chest tightening with emotion. A part of her was overwhelmed with pride, but another part was flooded with confusion. How could Tom carry something so massive alone, and how much more was there that they didn't know? For the first time in their marriage, Giselle felt the stirrings of doubt, not in Tom's love, but in the walls he had quietly built around a part of his soul. And she knew one thing for certain: this couldn't stay hidden much longer. The next morning brought a strange mixture of heaviness and determination. Giselle sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter, her fingers tracing the ink as if trying to absorb the emotions embedded within. Jack sat across from her, biting his lip, both of them unsure what to do next. We can't pretend we didn't see this, Jack finally said, his voice steady but soft. Giselle nodded. No, we can't. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, as if a decision had been made without words, they got to work. Giselle grabbed her laptop and began searching for any trace of the North Star Foundation. She quickly realized how meticulous Tom had been. The foundation had no website, no contact information, no digital footprint that linked back to him. Just a string of anonymous donations filed through multiple shells and trusts, each designed to protect the donor's identity. But the money left fingerprints in another way, through the lives it changed. Jack, browsing on his tablet, stumbled across a local news article about a children's hospital in Michigan that had received an anonymous $10 million donation after being on the brink of closing. Mom, look at this. He slid the screen toward her. The article quoted the hospital's director. We still don't know who did this. They wouldn't reveal their identity, but they saved hundreds of children's futures. Whoever they are, they're an angel. Giselle leaned closer, her breath hitching. It's him, she whispered. They dug deeper, following breadcrumbs. A food bank in Louisiana saved from bankruptcy. A homeless shelter in Arizona that expanded into 3 new locations overnight. Veterans in California receiving full medical treatments for injuries the VA couldn't cover. Everywhere they looked, the story was the same. Massive donations appearing just when hope seemed lost. No names, no recognition, only lives transformed. As they scrolled through interview after interview, the faces of those helped appeared on the screen. A single mother holding her toddler, tears streaming down her face as she described how an anonymous donor had paid for her child's life-saving surgery. A retired Marine who'd lost everything after returning from deployment, now speaking with a smile about the home he was able to rebuild, thanks to a miracle check that arrived with no sender. "Mom," Jack's voice trembled. "How did Dad do all this? How did he keep it secret for so long?" Giselle wiped her eyes, fighting to steady herself. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." As the day stretched on, they contacted a few of the organizations anonymously, pretending to be doing a human interest project. Each call added another piece to the puzzle. A woman from a domestic violence shelter shared, "We were closing in a week. I sat in my office praying for a miracle. The next morning there was a wire transfer for $2 million. No note, no explanation, just salvation." A flood of emotions overwhelmed Giselle, pride, awe, but also sadness. Sadness that the man she loved had carried this alone for years, without ever sharing the burden or the joy that came from it. Jack looked up at her, his eyes wide. "We have to talk to him, Mom. We can't let him do this by himself." Giselle nodded. "Yes. But we need to do this with love. No accusations, just understanding." That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of gold and crimson, Giselle and Jack sat together in the living room, rehearsing what they would say. Their hearts beat faster with each passing hour, because the truth was no longer a secret. And the man they thought they knew was so much more than they ever imagined. The house was unusually quiet that evening. The usual background noise of kids laughing, dishes clinking, and playful banter was replaced by a heavy anticipation. Giselle sat on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Jack paced back and forth, glancing nervously toward the front door. Then the familiar sound of keys jingling echoed through the hallway. The front door opened, and Tom walked in dressed in casual workout clothes, his face glowing from an evening run. He smiled as he entered, oblivious to the emotional storm awaiting him. "Hey everyone, I'm home," he said cheerfully, setting his keys on the counter. But when he looked up, he instantly sensed something was off. Giselle wasn't smiling. Jack wasn't his usual energetic self. Their faces were serious, weighted. Tom's eyes narrowed, his quarterback instincts immediately detecting tension. "What's going on?" Giselle took a deep breath. "Tom, we found the letter." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Tom's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then quickly to guarded resignation. He inhaled slowly, closing his eyes as if bracing for a tackle he knew was coming. "I see," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Jack stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Dad, why? Why didn't you ever tell us?" Tom sat down, resting his elbows on his knees. He rubbed his hands together, searching for the right words, words that had been buried in his heart for years. It wasn't something I did for anyone to know," he began softly. It was for me, for the people who needed it, and for the kid I used to be." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "I remember watching my mom cry at the kitchen table because we couldn't pay for something. I remember Dad telling us it was going to be okay when it wasn't. Those memories, they never left me. No matter how many Super Bowls, no matter how many records, that feeling never left." Giselle's eyes welled with tears, but she remained silent, letting him speak. "When I made it, when life gave me this unbelievable blessing, I promised myself that I wouldn't forget, that I wouldn't just build a life for myself, but I'd help others build theirs too, quietly. Without the cameras, without the headlines, just because it's the right thing to do." Jack sat beside him, struggling to hold back tears. "But Dad, why didn't you trust us to know? We could have helped." Tom turned, looking his son straight in the eyes. "It wasn't about trust, Jack. It was about protecting you, about keeping this sacred. Once the world knows, it changes things. People treat you differently. They expect things. They look at you not for who you are, but for what you can give. I didn't want that for you, or for your mom. Giselle finally reached out, placing her hand over his. Tom, all these years you carried this alone, all this weight. You didn't have to. Tears spilled down Tom's cheeks, something his family had rarely seen. I didn't know how to share it. I didn't know if I could. There was a long pause. Then Giselle pulled him into an embrace, Jack wrapping his arms around both of them. The flood of emotions wasn't one of anger or betrayal, but of overwhelming pride, love, and admiration. We're with you now, Giselle whispered. In all of it. Jack nodded against his father's shoulder. Yeah, you don't have to do this alone anymore. For the first time in years, Tom felt the crushing weight he had carried slowly lift. The secret that had once been a solitary mission was now a family bond, one stronger than any ring, any trophy, or any record ever could be. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of energy in the Brady household. What had once been a solitary mission of quiet generosity now became a shared family purpose. Conversations that used to center around sports schedules, school, or vacations were now infused with something deeper, how they could make an even greater impact together. Tom, Giselle, and the kids sat around the dining table, sketching out ideas on a large notepad. It wasn't just about writing checks anymore. It was about being present, about showing up, about turning anonymous generosity into tangible connections. I think, Tom said, tapping the pen against his lips, it's time we put a face to the North Star Foundation. Not because we need credit, but because it'll inspire others to give too. Giselle smiled. Yes, let's build something that lasts. Something that carries on even after the games are over. And so they did. The Brady family officially launched the foundation under their real name, merging the anonymous trust with a public initiative focused on supporting underprivileged children, disaster-stricken families, and veterans. The announcement was met with a mix of shock, admiration, and respect across the nation. Headlines poured in, not about touchdowns, but about transformation. But the real magic happened when they stepped away from the cameras and into the communities Tom had quietly supported for years. They visited the Children's Hospital in Michigan. As Tom walked through the new wing, his name now engraved on the entrance, doctors, nurses, and families gathered to meet the man who had saved countless lives without ever asking for thanks. One mother ran into Giselle's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I prayed for a miracle, she whispered. And your family was that miracle. In Louisiana, they stood at the food bank that had once been a day away from closure. Volunteers, now friends, shared how the donation had not only saved the facility, but allowed them to expand and feed thousands more every month. At a veterans rehabilitation center in California, Tom sat quietly among former soldiers. These were men and women who had lost limbs, battled PTSD, and fought through despair, now given a second chance because of the programs Tom had funded in silence. One Marine, his voice trembling, looked Tom in the eyes. You don't know it, but you saved my life. When everyone else forgot about me, you didn't. Tom's response was simple, but it carried the weight of his soul. Thank you for serving us, helping you. That's the least I could do. For the first time, Tom saw the faces behind the numbers, the souls behind the spreadsheets. And as much as he had changed their lives, they had changed his. In quiet moments, he reflected not on his Super Bowl rings or MVP awards, but on the simple, undeniable truth that greatness isn't defined by victories on the field, but by the lives you touch when no one is watching. As the foundation grew, so did the family's commitment. Giselle took charge of the women's initiatives. Jack started a youth sports scholarship fund. Vivian and Benjamin organized school drives, teaching their classmates about empathy, kindness, and service. And in the heart of it all was Tom, a man who once carried the weight of this secret alone, now lifted by the love and partnership of his family. As the sun set on another day of giving, Tom stood on the balcony of his home, watching the bay shimmer under the fading light. He smiled, not the smile of a quarterback after a win, but the smile of a man who had truly discovered what it meant to win at life. Because true greatness is what you do for others when no one is watching. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and click the next video on your screen to keep the inspiration going.